What is up, podcast family? I have an important announcement to share with you. Now, as you may know, psychedelic coaching is on the rise. But let's be honest, working with many of these substances can bring legal and ethical challenges. And that's why cannabis, which I talk about often, is the ultimate game changer. It's legal in most places, incredibly powerful as a tool for transformation, and completely underappreciated as a psychedelic medicine. Now, in my Coach with Cannabis certification program, you'll master the tools to guide clients safely, confidently, and effectively through transformative cannabis experiences. This is your chance to get ahead of the curve and step into the future of psychedelic coaching. Now, as of today, doors for the Coach with Cannabis program are now open, but we only have spots for 20 people on this initial run. So if you're interested and you're feeling the call within, head down to the show notes and apply today and see if you qualify for a spot in this revolutionary program. Now back to the show. Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Sometimes in life, I meet people that just feel like a breath of fresh air throughout the entirety of my life. It's hard to put into words what I mean by that, but for those of you who have experienced this notion, I imagine you know exactly what I mean. And today's guest is a woman who I can confidently say has done that each time I've connected with her. She is a trauma-informed psychedelic advocate and medicine worker, is a bioenergetic somatic coach, and is a woman dedicated to helping her clients liberate their inner power through the work she does with them. And in this episode, we dive deep into her journey, her experience of surviving Hurricane Helene, how the tools and methodologies she has learned supported her through that process, and much, much more. So please help me in welcoming my dear friend, Shawna Pelton, onto the show. Shawna, my dear, I am so excited to have you here with me today. You know, as I mentioned in the intro to everyone tuning in, Shawna and I met a little while back, and immediately I resonated with her. You know, we were just talking off record about how just we really vibe well together. And as a result of that, I'm really excited to see where the divine takes us in this conversation. So first of all, Shawna, how you doing today? What's going on in your world?
Oh my goodness. How am I? I am actually good. I'm recovering from Hurricane Helene still. But I'm feeling so aligned. I really am. I'm feeling good, aligned, and happy to be here.
You know, I really appreciate your positivity through a very challenging situation because in Boston, you know, in many places in the world, we heard about what happened with Helene, but you were right there. I mean, literally, we were talking before we hit record about how like your backyard got pretty much wiped out from tornadoes. Your road got washed away. You didn't have electricity for what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? 3 weeks. Yeah. That's a big wave to surf, you know? And I think a lot of us, it's hard to imagine what it would be like going back to like, okay, now we need to focus again on survival needs. I think all of us have had the privilege of like not having to worry about that for the most part, hopefully anyway.
Yeah.
And so like, it's really wild that happened. And I have a lot of questions. I don't know the answers, but I have a lot of questions around what that was.
Yeah.
You know, was it just a natural superstorm? That's a possibility, but being as how I'm a conspiracy realist here, I have questions, you know?
Same. I actually appreciate the conspiracy realist piece because one of the things that I found, what was happening after the storm, once I did have, like we went down to our neighbors in order to get Starlink. He had Starlink. So we were able to use the internet on occasion to be able to make the phone calls that we needed to make, which were literally to tell our family day to day what was going on. It was survival mode. I mean, they were planning to drop us food with the helicopter. Like that was the stage that we were in at the beginning. It was really touch and go. But one of the things that was happening was people started with the conspiracy of what they thought it was going on. And you know what's funny? I'm usually right there and go, oh, that's curious. And I dive in. I found it very unhelpful. And it was unhelpful because I didn't want to blame. There was no blame. It was literally survive. I had to get myself to the next day. Every single day was a survival day. So to be in that place of who done it wasn't actually helpful. It wasn't helpful for me. So
I agree with that.
anyway, but now I'm going, huh?
Yeah.
Now's the time.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, I think there is a time where, physically and actually, or figuratively and literally, there's a time and place, right? Like when the fires were happening in California, like California's still burning, right? And people were like, oh, it's this, it's that. And I'm like, guys, I get it.
Wait.
People care. They don't want people to get screwed over. But like right now, there are still people fighting for their life. Let's like make sure they're taken care of. Let's put our focus and our energy instead of going online and posting about conspiracies.
That's it.
There'll be time for that, when everyone's safe and like, they're rebuilding or whatever. But again, like right now, if we have any energy we can expend, let's just put it into helping people survive right now.
That is the most important piece to it, where our energy goes, or where our attention goes, energy flows. Yeah. And so we want to make sure that our attention is going to the loving kindness and service-based thoughts and behaviors versus trying to, blame someone or trying to get justice at that stage. Yeah. So it is important where you put your energy matters for collectively as well as individually.
Yeah. So one thing I'm really curious on for you, Shawna, is being as how I know we both have benefited greatly from psychedelic medicines and whatnot. What do you think, if any, the role was in which psychedelics and the experiences you've had there played with you handling this otherwise very much survival situation? Like, how do you think those experiences, or do you think they prepared you for this at all?
100%. And I did contemplate that a lot during this recovery stage, a lot. I've been, let's just start by saying I have been a dabbler in psychedelics since I was most normal teens growing up in a big city in Boston. But when I started working with the medicine as an actual guide, a teacher, a facilitator, and being intentional about its use, one of the things that I recognize is a value of doing, not just taking medicine and having a random experience. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Those are fun. But like taking the medicine and going in and having an intentional objective.
Yeah.
And so working with it on a level of body for trauma release, it actually trained me to widen my window of tolerance and to be able to handle stress at like a boss level. And I'm not saying it wasn't stressful, but I wasn't panicky. I didn't even cry for this, the devastation all around me. I cried for the love. I actually said that to a neighbor just yesterday. I said, I wasn't crying tears of sadness. I was seeing the outpouring of love and my heart was touched. Yeah. And I just couldn't believe how much divine presence was with us. And I actually remember saying to Tom, my partner, I said, I don't wish this upon anyone. I really don't. But at the same time, I kind of wish everyone would go through it, because now I can say I lived through an apocalypse and guess what? You're going to be okay. Nothing to fear. Yeah. And I told you on the before the recording, I started contemplating, okay, well, I've got running water because we have a river, the river that washed out our road. We have a river. And we're at the top of the mountain, so we had no pollution behind us. Gotcha. So that meant our water was actually clean. And we also have fruit growing all around us. So like the apple trees, pear trees, and plum trees. And I contemplated that and I said, I'll be fine. I can eat fruit and drink water. I'm going to go on a fast. This is going to be great. People do it all the time on purpose. I'm just forced into it. It's okay. So it's an attitude that's real. Like it wasn't a false spiritual bypassing at all. There was nothing false about it. It was go time. It was game time. And so all of the training that I did over the years has literally put me in a really good position to be able to face these crises in a way that allows me to step into what I need, the role, the archetype that I need to embody in order to navigate the terrain. that I was faced with and still am to this day faced with.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. That's what this is about. Being prepared, taking the medicine so to heal, that's great.
Yeah.
So to develop yourself and so to reach those heights of your greatest potential, whatever that is. I think people need to find that for themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, good question. I'm glad that you brought it up because it's an essential aspect. I credit my psychedelic use for my capacity to handle the apocalypse.
What is up, family? I wanted to take a second while you're tuning in to tell you about an amazing new product I recently began using. Now, you guys know I do ads very rarely, and my promise to you is that anything I speak about is something I personally have found value in using regularly. Well, recently, I came across a company called Brain Supreme, who sells microdoses of mushrooms mixed with adaptogens, nootropics, and other additions as well. And even though I've microdosed off and on for years, I have never felt results like these. In only 2 weeks, I'm sleeping better, I have far less mind chatter, my ability to perform has exponentially improved, and best of all, the sense of inner peace I've been feeling is like nothing I've ever experienced in microdosing before. Right now, you can get 15% off of any of their products when you use code SPRAGUE15 at checkout. And to find out more about them and grab some for yourself, head down to the show notes for this episode and begin your journey into microdosing today. Now back to the show. Yeah. I mean, that is a statement right there, right? Like, because it's so accurate, and that's why, any of these kind of things, right? Even just exercise, right? Like any of these things that get you okay with dealing with thoughts in your mind that are very uncomfortable and surviving through them anyway, and finding like the center, the eye of the storm, if you will, right? Like that is, to me, the best part of these experiences because, not only do they remind you of divinity, not only do they remind you of what you truly are, but they also can allow you to create what I call relentless resilienceness, and that's one of my core values, that I have is, kind of what I stand for, and the reason for that is that I find that people that, enjoy the psychedelic space, right? And by enjoy, I don't mean sometimes we aren't white knuckling as fuck, right? But for some reason, we like hitting that button. I think that there's something in us that wants us to find out what we're made of. It's almost like a curiosity, cause and effect type thing where it's like, hey, this is going to be really challenging. Like Combo, for instance, right? Combo is not a psychedelic traditionally, right? And it's not a long experience, but it's hellish. I mean, it's very uncomfortable. But there's a part of me that kind of likes that feeling of like, how well can I sit up straight while everything in my guts wants me to die? And how well can I even crack a smile or crack a joke as I'm like getting frog face and everything swelling up? There's a part of me that likes that because I know if I can handle that, then the next time that, maybe I get triggered over something Rachel says, or I get cut off and I want to flip out on someone or whatever, that I'm going to be able to remember my training and just be like, hey, if you can get through Combo and breathe through it, you can get through this, brother. You'll be okay.
Wow. Now we have a new focus. We're training people. We're training people.
Resilience training, that's really what
it is.
It's so true. Because really, if you want to boil down life, right? Like what is, life's ultimate mission? Survive, right? Like that's and you got to actually experience that, right? For many of us, we haven't got to experience the fact of that. And that's why I think a lot of us create these kind of scenarios like Combo or psychedelics or rites of passage, fasting. Because I think that the beauty of today's world is for a lot of us, we don't have to worry about our survival needs, so we kind of get to move up a little bit. And as a result, I think we're starting to find that it's great that we don't have to focus on survival needs, but some of the things that happen as a result of you focusing on that are very beneficial to the human experience,
Yes.
So it's amazing that we can't change the fact you went through it, right? We can't change the fact that Hurricane Helene hit. What we can do is find the gold within it. And that's what I see you saying when you're saying like my heart was outpouring, not from sadness, but from joy and from love, right? You were able to find the needle in the haystack, if you will, when it comes to the love in an otherwise very challenging situation.
It truly, and it wasn't hard to do. It was right there. And every time, so one of the benefits of where I live in a very small town. It's a rural town in the mountains. I think there's like a total of 500 people in my town. And we have a small old elementary school that was used as the community center. So they were feeding us every day, and they had supplies. And so we would go down to the community center and share stories with people. And we'd also go, okay, how are you doing? What do you need? And everybody had the story of love. Everyone talked about how much joy it brought them to come together in community, to meet their neighbors, and to be able to be of service this way, and to be able to be on the receiving end of such love. And so it was quite the experience indeed.
Wow. That is beautiful. For me, like the golden goose within the otherwise destruction. I mean, California was similar, right? Like the stories of, all these firefighters coming from different areas. You know, I have a person I follow on Instagram, never met her in person. She does great body work. Like she's a rolfer. And I love rolfers. Like they're all just very unique, you know. It's not like if you go to get a lymph drainage massage, like, you know, they're kind of similar, but like rolfers are just all over the place and they're very spiritual usually. And she actually went out to California with her partner and they were giving out free massages to all the firemen and fireworkers and police officers and things like that, the first responders that were like sleeping in their truck for days on end, you know. And it's just like, those are the things that, you know, I think really allow humanity to see like, hey, this is a horrible thing that just happened. We wish it didn't happen. But look at how much everyone all of a sudden realized our similarities are way stronger than our differences, you know, and I think we need that in society right now. You know?
Exactly. And again, focus on what's right. And there's a lot of people who, and this might be part of the benefit again of using psychedelics intentionally as you know, what's the objective? And it's not to say you have to do that always. I'm not a rigid person. I do believe in balance, but one of the things about the mind is it's similar to what we were talking about, resilience training for the nervous system, and the psyche, the mind, in a similar way, needs conditioning. We need to train it to be able to focus on what's right. And that's a challenge for a lot of people, especially because the looping obsessive thoughts that people can get stuck on when they are focused on their survival needs, when they are hyper focused on feeling deficient in love or deficient in, you know, good self-esteem, which is that feeling they're not good enough. And their behaviors reflect that unconscious deficiency. And so if we can actually identify where those core wounds are and be able to condition the mind to be able to stay in its lane, don't go outside of that window where you get stuck in that loop. There's even an electromagnetic field that gets created when we're consistently repeating those same obtrusive thoughts or looping thoughts. And it's like a runaway train, hard to be able to pull back, get it back into the station kind of thing. But
100%. I think of them as mind viruses, right? Like, you know, again, I have a lot of friends that don't even believe viruses exist. And I'm kind of in that, you know, camp. A buddy of mine, Adam Shell, who I've had on the show, he says something really funny. Someone asked him, why do you believe in flat earth? He said, well, because the powers that be tell us it's round. So I start as far away from what they tell me and I work my way back, you know? And so like, it's the same kind of thing. What I was just mentioning. It's like, you know, I kind of do that now where I'm like, if they say viruses are real, then they got to be not real. And I'll work my way back from there. Maybe I find they are real, but I'm going to start with the polar opposite of whatever the mainstream says and work my way back from there. But again, like if we think about this idea of like Paul Levy calls it Watiko, you know, it's been called a lot of different things throughout antiquity, but this idea that is very honestly easy to understand. Like I don't really think it's that far out of a concept. You know, any of us that have been in self-development, coaching, whatever, we know this stuff like the back of our hand. It's like what happens when someone gets stuck in a program, like a programmed, you know, pattern. You know, they're not really themselves in that. Like they are, but like their subconscious, which has been distorted to believe maybe something is detrimental or something that isn't useful for a high quality life. Their subconscious, which is 95 to 98% of our waking state of reality, like what we express as, takes over. And if they don't have a meditation practice or they don't connect with psychedelics, so they don't do something, walk in the woods to give them time and space to be silent, it's so easy to let that 98% overwhelm the 2%, you know? And until you can actually become consciously aware of like, oh shit, something is going on here.
Right.
Now I got to figure out what's in the operating system that's doing that. It's no wonder why a lot of people have challenge with that, because we've been trained like, just go to school, produce, go to college, get a job, get a family, like all these things before you even know who you are. Like I'm 33 and I feel like I'm just starting to figure out who I am, and so many of my friends have kids. And I'm like, I mean, again, whatever strokes someone's perfect, life is great. But I know for me, I'm like, damn, that's crazy. You have kids already.
I love that you brought that up. So I was a mom at 19.
Wow.
And now my son's 28. He's almost 29.
Wow.
And,
that's cool.
and so like you're talking about 33, and I keep saying to my son and my daughter-in-law, I'm like, look, you're still babies. Okay. Your brain is still growing. You're developing, and how you think today and who you think you are is not even close to the continuous evolutionary journey that unfolds as you develop more and more and more awareness of who you are and how you operate, or your operating is about your level of consciousness, by the way, just in terms of like how to look at this. So we grow through stages of development. We grow through the stages of getting our most basic primary needs met for our physiological well-being. We go through stages of relational well-being, that social, emotional need. It gets developed during our childhood. And then we grow through the stage of development for our self-esteem, which is that feeling of like, I'm smart at something, right? Like, I'm valid.
Got to be something in there.
There's got to be something I like and I'm good at and I want to continue to pursue. And then from there, you integrate and you transform into the next stage of development for your soul. So you start with the ego's journey, and those stages of development are natural for all of us. But the level of consciousness, the way that we think and how we behave, is a reflection of what stage of consciousness you're coming from as it relates to whatever thing you're engaged with. So, and here's how I'll break it down. And this is something we do in the psychedelic therapy as well, because it's really important to use that medicine to go into a core wound, to identify that stage of development where you feel like you might have had a deficiency. A deficiency need could be from a drama, like just conflict in the house. It wasn't bad, but it was not conducive for a healthy, stable nervous system, let's say, versus trauma. And there's various levels of trauma, but everyone who's had an experience that they can look back on and realize that changed them, we all know. There's difficult experiences that everyone goes through. So what ends up happening is it impresses upon us this distortion about who we are and what life is. It changes our worldview, which then in turn causes us to put on a mask. And that mask is for survival. It's actually intended to keep us in a place of operating smoothly so we can get our needs met, or to a degree, get our needs met. So when we reach that stage of maturity in life where we're pursuing more, where we think, I want more in life. I want to have more abundance. I want to have more joy. I want to fulfill my purpose here and literally follow a path of selfless service. What does that even mean? And what am I going to do here? Psychedelics are the best way, in my personal experience. Of course, it's relative.
Yeah.
The best way for me.
Yeah.
But the best way to go in to those places that the unconscious is holding on to those distortions, and to be able to then access that, to bring it up and to rewrite the script consciously. So you're not only breaking down and deconstructing old patterns, but you're building up and reconstructing new patterns by design. And those new patterns are in alignment with who you really are as your soul's expression of self, most authentic expression of self. A lot of people don't even know what that means, but this journey helps you to tease it out and get closer and closer and closer to feeling aligned with what that is. And one of the funny things that happens is I've recognized that even people who will say, and I've probably been there before myself, like, I don't know who I am. I don't even know who is my authentic self. What does being authentic actually even look like? I don't even know. I've been wearing a mask for so long. I didn't know I was wearing a mask. I just thought this was me. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, my life just blew up and I found out I was hiding behind this mask all along. And so it come to find out your higher self, your innermost sentient sovereign self has been there all along. And then when you do a little bit of the work, you start to tease out all of those encounters in life where you realize, oh, I was there. I was there. I didn't know I was there. I was there.
Yeah.
And it's like this blossoming of consciousness. And then once you get to those higher levels of like I said, you grow in stages and you operate on levels. So you get to these levels of consciousness where you operate from your soul's agenda versus your ego's defenses. And that to me is the best journey. It's exciting. I love doing this work.
Oh my God, Shawna, that's amazing. Thank you for taking us through those different stages. And I agree with you. I know that this is subjective, but I really think that psychedelics are the best and fastest and most efficient way when done consciously, responsibly, all the things, right? Again, it's kind of like this, right? If you have options, right? You're like, do I want to walk to California? Do I want to drive? Or do I want to take a plane? There's obviously different risks associated with taking a plane or driving a car than walking, but walking is not without risk either. Right. And the risk overall is that time is the most valuable resource. So how long is it going to take you to walk to California when otherwise you could be there in 2 days or, 5 days if you drive or 6 hours if you fly. Right. So again, like this whole argument people say around like I just went on Danny Morell's podcast and, I was looking at the comments and people were like, Jesus is the only way. And I so wanted to just comment and be like, do you believe Jesus is God? Yes, of course. Do you believe we are God? Yes, of course. So who created cannabis? Like it's just walking them back to realize like it's all the same thing, guys. It really doesn't matter. This whole like duality of like, this is the way and this isn't, is just so silly. Like at the end of the day, the way is whatever way resonates with you. That's it. Right. And in my experience, there's been nothing that has helped me rapidly evolve more than consciously connecting with psychedelic medicines. There's probably a reason, I think people forget the fact that with this new psychedelic renaissance that's going on that is being compared a little bit, more conscious, I think, than the 60s and 70s, but kind of that same kind of resurgence type thing. I think people are thirst trapping themselves into thinking these things are new or like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen if you keep doing these. It's like, guys, there is nothing.
Like we know.
This has been around for over 10,000 years. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be fine. You know what hasn't been around 10,000 years? Going to a 9-to-5. Taking pharmaceuticals, like
I was going to say SSRIs.
Exactly. Like, and also, when you look into Chris Bennett's work, for instance, cannabis and many other medicines are mentioned throughout the Bible. There's so many mentions of cannabis throughout all these different sacred texts and other medicines too, right? Like we look at these tribes down in the Amazon that have been working with ayahuasca for 5,000 to 10,000 years. Right. It's like, don't you think if it was that dangerous, they would have been wiped out already? Like, guys, can we not just use some logic here and see like, if this has been around 10,000 years and human beings have actually had their best times when these medicines were not being stamped out, like during the Roman times and these kind of darker times where they were trying to go after these medicines. And the only reason they were trying to go after it is because it got in the way of their business model of being like, well, you can't talk to God, but this guy here in the white robes, he can. And oh, by the way, he needs money and he needs you to do an animal sacrifice, right? So like, again, like when you really look at this and for anyone who's taken psychedelics, when you break through, that feeling is everything. That feeling is straight God, and you're connected with Jesus. You're connected with any deity you want to because they're just you. They're part of the infinite, Like we don't need to obsess over any one thing. And that's what I like about psychedelics is they don't ask you to worship them. They ask for respect and reverence. They're like, hey, we have a lot of power. You might want to be aware of what you're doing, but I don't need to go pray for them every Sunday or do any of these things because they just give me the direct experience of it. And once you have that, it never really leaves you. Like I can feel the Christ consciousness in me all the time. Some days are much better than others, right? I'm not fully there every day by any means, but because I had that direct experience and I reunited with Christ consciousness or Kundalini awakening, any of these terms that really speak to the same idea, because I've experienced that, now I have it. But I think the challenge with religion and these kind of things, they expect people to just have faith in an experience they've never had, So it's like, believe in whatever you want, but just like, don't forget that you can, right? Think about apples, right? You have apples around you. It's like, at what point are people going to realize, right? Like, at what point are people going to realize that you can go to school and learn about apples. You can learn about pectin. You can learn about the different varieties. You can learn about their growing season. But none of that matters if you haven't actually eaten an apple, right? And I think, and I think what people forget is like, in my way, or in my life, the way that I found is most efficient, I won't say right or wrong because that implies duality, but the way I found is most efficient is like, go have an experience. And then when you're like, how did that happen? Now you go learn all the intellectual knowledge to back up the direct experience. Don't go learn all the intellectual knowledge and be like, well, cannabis is bad. It's like, how many times you smoked? Never. It's like, then why are you talking to me? Like, why are you acting like you get what this is?
Right.
So
right. Or I smoked one time when I was 15 and I had a panic attack. Of course you
exactly.
did.
Sounds like it worked,
Of course you did. Of course you did. And you know what? This is such a great point about what you're saying about like, well, first you brought up the fast path and, don't knock it until you try it kind of thinking. And I had, because I was introduced to all kinds of drugs at a very young age, I ended up doing a bit of a different spin once I hit 33. I ended up going, I think, was it 33? When did I start? I pursued the spiritual path, the clean path. And I did that that was my psychedelic experience, right? Walking this life with no substances and just prayer and meditation and using the ancient technology that we were taught in the mystery schools. We were taught how to make use of this temple of light, so to have the experiences of connecting with our inner divine. And one of the things that I noticed about that, well, actually, there's a couple things. One thing was about how much substances were demonized on that path and the circle that I was surrounded by. And I think that it's fair to say that maybe some of these people were demonizing it because they had their own bad experience, or maybe they had their own unhealthy relationship with substances, as did I. I'm not going to lie, I did too. And or they, like you said, they never tried it. And so they were sincerely in belief that this path that they were on was the right path for everybody. And so I bought into that. And I fully applied myself as a devotee of the way. And in this clean state, seeking to know myself, seeking to know the divine, seeking to understand and awaken my purpose. And one of the things that I realized was, it doesn't matter how spiritual you are, if you don't get to the trauma in your body, you're not going to be well. And after years and years and years, I think it was like a 7-year intensive that I did on that particular journey. And I mean intensive. It was daily rituals, and I
know exactly what you're talking about. I thought I remember having this conversation. We don't have to mention any names, but I get exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and daily rituals. And so I had to come to terms with the fact that the spiritual path wasn't healing my PTSD, CPTSD. It didn't even help me understand my psyche, funny enough, because I didn't know the stages of development that we go through as a physical being with an ego. We were taught to essentially dismiss the ego's needs at all. And that approach ended up causing harm. Not only did it cause harm to me because I felt like I wasn't good enough. Here I am doing all the things and I still have trauma. What the?
Spending a lot of money trying to heal all that.
Yeah. And lots and lots of money attempting to heal trauma from a spiritual quest. And maybe people have done it. Well done, you people. Wasn't my story. And it wasn't the story of those who came into this community that I was a part of, who I witnessed with mental illness from their own personal traumas, and lots of reasons why mental illness might be a thing for people. But that opened me up to realize there's something more that I need to understand. And my background happens to be in natural medicine. I did study holistic healing and worked in clinical settings for a long time. And so it was kind of going back to my roots of the clinical approach. But because I'm holistic minded, I was looking at things holistically. And it came to me, I think the psychedelic medicine, that renaissance that you talked about, one of the things that changed was before I started my spiritual quest, it was a bit of a free for all. And even though shamans were doing this medicine with people to heal their soul's wounds in the forest, let's say, or I even did a shamanic retreat in Arizona, right? Like, so I attempted that route. I really did. And it was eye-opening, more than literally eye-opening, but like spiritually awakening for sure. But what happens is this: you have this awakening, you touch the divine, you get a taste of what's possible. But if you don't know how to bring it down through the worlds, the world of your thinking, the world of your feeling, the world of your being, if you don't know how to integrate it into your life and it become the embodiment or the expression of everything that you tapped into, then it's going to shift back into your old pattern, your old reroute, or whatever your nervous system was routed subconsciously and routed to be. So that spiritual experience doesn't necessarily lend to a physiological change for everybody. Maybe there's an occasional random experience. I've yet to find that. However, so this is what I've learned since coming back to medicine as a path for healing on a physical level. There are 3 types or 3 tiers of psychedelics. Have you ever heard this before?
I think you and I might have breezed over, but I would love for you to share this because I want to hear it, and I know everyone listening is going to want to hear it too.
Okay. So most people are familiar with tier 3 because tier 3 is the transpersonal experience that we have when we take, say, psilocybin or ayahuasca or there's so many. There's a lot of things. Even cannabis has brought me to tier 3 states, but it's usually those more like bigger medicines that people will have this, like, I saw the face of God moment, or I touched something that took me out of my body. So that's tier 3. That's what people tend to gravitate towards. And they think, yeah, tier 3. But like I said, if you don't know how to bring it through the worlds, through your body, through the psyche, it's not going to stabilize. It doesn't. If your body has a lot of trauma, is wired for trauma, it's not going to stabilize. So tier 1, let's go back a little bit. I'll come to tier 2 in a minute. So tier 1 is the body. Tier 1 is primary consciousness. If tier 3 is transpersonal, primary consciousness has everything to do with your basic needs to survive. It is your nervous system. And if you can get into the nervous system with a medicine like cannabis, which is the best number 1 tier 1 medicine, people can use ketamine to access tier 1 states. That's not to say it's impossible, but usually you dissociate. Most people tend to dissociate on ketamine, and maybe someone has a magic way, a method of preventing dissociation for people. I haven't found that magic way, but maybe some people can. But essentially, you don't necessarily want to dissociate too much during the session. You want to go into the pain, and there's benefit there. And when you're able to go into the body and be with the pain and actually access that part of you in pain, you're actually with yourself in a new way. And then you can walk yourself home. You can bring yourself up. You can literally mature yourself, reparent yourself, rewire yourself for safety, for success. So starting at tier 1 is the best approach, body up, foundation up. Then the secondary consciousness, that's tier 2, is when we can actually use our rational mind as a way to reframe things from a different attitude, from a different world view, because you're no longer in defense mode, protecting your dysregulated nervous system or your core wounds. Instead, you're rational and you're able to rationally approach things. I personally love MDMA for a tier 2 experience. I do know that ketamine can be also a tier 2 experience for some people some of the time. But a tier 2 experience is also really beneficial for couples therapy or for healing in like family relations or something. Taking a medicine to allow yourself to open up, to be receptive to another person's words, and then be able to feel safe to say what's really on your mind, what you really need to say. Sometimes people didn't even know what they needed to say until they had that experience of opening up this way. And so this journey, and then you're able to then go to that transpersonal space because you stabilized your nervous system, you corrected your imbalances in your mind, and now you're like, all right, bring it. Show me what I didn't know before that I need to know now in order to walk the highest path of my destiny. Wow. So that's the journey through
that is amazing. Shawna, thank you for laying that out, because I, based on personal experience, definitely understand what you just said to be true. You know, the reason I've been so drawn to cannabis, or there's many reasons, but one of the main reasons was exactly due to what you said. I had trauma in my body, and I feel like overall, that's where most people are at. Like, yes, can people experience God and have an amazing experience? Yeah, sure. But like you're saying, I think everyone's trying to read the back of the book or read the last page of the book. And it's like, listen, guys, I get it. What if by starting with cannabis and on tier 1, by the time you get to tier 3, that can become your waking, sober state of reality? No medicine necessary. Like, what if that's the trajectory? Yeah. And so, sure, if you want to go have a level 3 experience right now or a tier 3 experience and you think that's positive for you, I'm not going to tell you can't. But also understand that, like, if you try to jump levels, like, think about it this way, right? It's kind of like if you don't work out and you try to clean and snatch a 300-pound clean and snatch, like, you're going to get injured, you know?
You're going to hurt yourself.
Like, or the potential to get injured goes up a lot. And so, like, you know, how this kind of plays out is like, what happens if someone that has a lot of trauma just goes and like rips 5-MeO DMT with someone they met at Burning Man? Like, yikes, like that could be a psychic break, you know? Right. So like,
and it has happened. And that's why a dirty secret in the psychedelic world, especially before the Renaissance. Well, before the Renaissance, you'd hear, like, even a shaman I worked with, she said this thing to me about how people come to the jungle for these transpersonal experiences and have mental breakdowns because they're not primed for transpersonal.
Not to mention, they're probably like not eating healthy. You know, they probably are showering in tap water, like, you know, all these other things that create toxic load in the body that then impact your body's energy or vitality, your vibrancy. Like, all of that stuff matters. And the reason why I love talking about this stuff is not only because it's important, but because let's look at what's really happening, right? Like, I was a part of the same place that you were, right? We'll talk in code. I don't want to, you know, say anything, but we were part of the same place and, you know, we connected on that. And, you know, again, like, I learned a lot of great things to that place. You know, there were a lot of topics that I enjoyed learning from. I learned from some great teachers in there. But the thing that really just soured my brain was how they talked about plant medicine. Because what was their thing? They're like, oh, you know, that's going to mess you up, you know, blah, 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 all these things. When in reality, it's like, no, human actions are what led to those undesirable results, right? Like, why are you blaming these medicines? Like, they're just growing in the ground, not asking of anything. We're the ones going over there and going, let me see what happens if I take this. So again, like, if we want to look at why things are getting messed up, let's look at the fact that we've never been given a user manual for some of the most powerful tools in existence. And we don't even, like, most of us don't have a background because we're so disconnected from God as a collective. It'd be one thing if we were trained to meditate and God is good and all these things. And then we were like, oh, let's just go see what happens. At least then we'd have some kind of foundation. But you're thinking like people watching reality TV and like so in the Matrix, and then they're going to like do 5-MeO DMT or ayahuasca. Like, yeah, of course that's not going to lead to any good results. And then when people say, oh, it's because the medicines are just silly, they're going to traumatize you more. It's like, no, guys, you're essentially saying the same thing as if someone said, don't drive a dragster. They're all terrible. They're just going to put you in a wall. It's like, yeah, you got to be a race car driver to know how to drive a dragster. That doesn't mean the dragster is bad. It means, can we look at the person that had never driven a dragster that decided to get in there, their actions to do that? You know, let's actually put the blame there and figure out how to make it better.
Yeah.
Just so silly, you know?
Really, really silly and well said. There's a book called The
Oh,
Immortality Key. Have you heard
yes.
of it?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, because I read it a long time ago or when it first came out, but I believe that man who was the author, sorry, I forget his name. If you
I'll
remember,
look it up.
shout it out. And I believe,
Yeah.
Google it. So I believe he said when he was researching, it was for education or, excuse me, he wanted to do clean research. He's never done drugs. So he wanted to have an impartial objective, or an impartial opinion by doing the research. And I actually appreciated that because he was able to actually go into the history and saw where the line got broken, where we went from using medicine as a way to connect with each other and connect with our divinity in ceremony to then being told by the church that we couldn't, because that wasn't the right way to access divinity. And we had to go through them in order to speak with our creator. And anyone who was using those medicines was probably
Killed or something.
offed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I mean, think about this, right? Like, there's a great way that I've found to navigate life. Because again, these days we have social media, we have all these things. You never know if someone's telling the truth, right? It's so easy for someone to seem one way and then actually be totally different. But the only thing, Shawna, that I found that doesn't lie in today's world? Results, right? So when I look at religion and I see wars, I see molestation, pedophilia, all that stuff. And then I look over to psychedelics and sure, nothing is perfect, right? There are shamans that have negative intent and whatever. But I think about the times I've gone to church and the energy I felt there, and the times where I've connected with medicine and the energy I felt there. I like the results more on the medicine side. That's the only reason I choose it. If tomorrow I stopped getting those kind of results, I would look elsewhere. But over time, I have found that the things that really can just, boom, give me the thing are in the medicine realm. Otherwise, I have to have faith and then pay people money and go through all these rituals and pay for all these healings.
Right.
When in reality, that's not how Jesus talked about healing. That's not how any of these deities talked about it. Because again, like, even to believe, like, have you ever read Disappearance of the Universe before?
You know what? I heard you reference it once, and I got it on my Audible right now.
Perfect.
I started listening.
Perfect. I think I've mentioned it on literally every episode now. So I promise you guys, I'm not an affiliate. I'm not affiliated with them. I just love this book. But
Should be then.
when I read that book did what medicine does for me. And I'll tell you why. Because especially in that organization we were in, I like to think of life in two ways: simplicity or complexity. Simplicity is the language of God. Complexity is the language of the ego. So when you hear about, like, I'm really good friends with Aaron Abke, who we both know, and he, in my opinion, is the world leader of what Jesus was actually teaching. Not just believing in him, but actually following what he said to do, right? And what was his thing? He said, follow the 10 commandments, but honestly, you can just love your neighbor and love your God. That's it. That is simple. Anyone can do that, right? You don't need any money. You don't need to be any certain age. Like, anyone can do that. That is simplicity. You know what's not simple? Hey, you have to come spend a shit ton of money. You have to do all these rituals. And if you don't, your negative ego is going to take you over. And then you have to meditate 4 hours a day. Like, that is not, that's ego creating that. That's complexity. That's falling more into the dream, And when you read Disappearance, you'll see what I mean by that. Because it's just, that's what they talk about. It's crazy.
And if I could be honest, I'll tell you what it ended up causing in me, because yes, it was many, many hours a day that I would be doing ritual work.
Same.
I had guilt. I had a lot of guilt.
Me too.
And I carried that guilt with me for years. And even after and I was present with it. It wasn't like it was, I'm sure part of it was underneath the iceberg, right? You only see the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. But I was present with a lot of that guilt for many years. And I realized just how much damage having, those kind of complex, like you said, complexity. Actually, what's interesting, you're familiar with Richard Rudd.
Yeah,
Richard Rudd and the Gene Keys. Yeah. Love his work so much. That changed me. That was, I think, 10 years ago when I picked up that book. And I've never put it down. It really was like,
I have it right over there, my other bookshelf.
But he talked about Yeah, I
Yeah.
live in it. It talked about simplicity. I think was it him that talked about complexity being the way in which we evolve in oh, it wasn't him. I'm sorry. I'm
I
confusing
think
two
I've
different
heard
people.
this though.
I apologize. I'm going to, regardless of Richard Rudd's
Yeah, yeah,
grave,
yeah.
regardless
He's
of who
awesome.
said this, complexity is it's almost as if a geometry changes shape and evolves over time. So if you ever watched like a flower of life pattern getting made, first it starts with a circle, then all of a sudden you have the Vesica Pisces, and then it unfolds and folds and folds. And so they say it unfolds in more complex
Mm-hmm.
ways. But then it said that it's when we complicate things in that model, we can complicate things in that model. And by complicating it is when we collapse our system, is when we lose ourselves, we don't know our way, we feel lost on our path, we feel doubt. And what do we do when we're in doubt? We seek to an authority. We're going to ask someone else who knows better than us, as if that's the solution outside of us. And so that's the risk of being complicated and that complexity that you described, is losing your inner guidance and giving your power over to something or someone outside of yourself. And the truth is, even cannabis or other psychedelics can be that, right? We can lose ourselves, assuming that that's the only way in which we can access that divinity within us. And it's not the truth. It is a way. And once it opens up that pathway, and the more and more and more interactions you have with the medicine in that regard, in that specific way, right? That protocol of using it intentionally, I find it's easier for me to access those sweet zones in my waking consciousness, ordinary states of consciousness. It's almost as if I have memories that flood me. I have revelations that come to me in my waking state. So it's as if it's like the medicine is still working even after a session, to reduce that complexity, if you would, to reduce that complicated mental construct, and to just breathe into this moment in a simple way, navigating your path.
No, it made perfect sense. That was amazing. We could have like mic drop right there, and it's so true because again, right, like the challenge with medicine, and it's not really a challenge with medicine at all. It's a challenge with the human psyche, right? Which is like what I want these organizations to realize. You're blaming plants and fungus, right? Like they didn't do anything. They're just sitting there growing on God's green earth. What we choose to go do with them is our responsibility to take accountability on, right? So the challenge there is that, it happened with me, right? Like, because I wasn't raised in a environment of monks or A Course in Miracles workers or anything like that, my parents are absolutely amazing. Love them to death. They did an amazing job. But because of that, I grew up in a world that I just thought this was what there is, right? And I believed in some kind of afterlife. I never really knew what to call God, but I wasn't traumatized by it, by like other people that I know. Like Aaron grew up in the church, like had a lot of programming and things like that. And that led to his beautiful Kundalini awakening, everything he does now. But I was talking to him when I was in Austin last week, and I was like, dude, I'm just starting to really appreciate the fact that my parents never pushed God on me, because once I decided to be like, all right, cool, I'm in, like there was nothing to heal, like it was just like, this guy's always been cool. I just kind of left it off there, whatever. But what happened to me was that when I connected with medicine and I felt divinity for the first time, first of all, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know to call it divinity. I just knew, whoa, that felt way cooler than I usually feel. That's all I knew. So because I didn't get a user manual in school for what to eat, how to take care of yourself, who we are as a spiritual being, having a human experience, any of this stuff, I just found something that made me feel better than I was normally feeling. And so because of that, I was like, I should have more of that all the time. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, because they haven't realized that all these plants and medicines are showing them is an image of themselves with less nonsense on the table. Like think about it this way, right? Like say you have a dinner table and you make memories there, and then life gets crazy and you start putting one paper on, and then before you know it, there's not even a dinner table anymore. It's just a bunch of piles of paper, right? And so you actually forget that underneath all that is a beautiful dinner table that you get to create memories at, right? that's how most of us are, like we're a beautiful dinner table. It's always been there. It's just got clouded over by junk, right? And what medicine does is they give you an opportunity. They almost show you a picture of before it was filled with stuff, right? They're like, remember, but if you don't realize, oh yeah, I can clear all that stuff away and work through my trauma and things like that, and this just giving me a glimpse of what's possible, then you're going to be like, no, I just need to be reminded of that picture over and over again. And that's where I got into it, right? With cannabis, is that I ended up realizing I like when the table is clean a lot more, but I didn't know that you could clean it at all. I just thought I didn't even know that it was messy, right? I just knew like my table sucks. This image makes me feel better.
Well,
yeah.
And that's it. And I think that's the place that people get stuck in, is like, well, this is just the way it is. This is just my life. And it's like, that's not the way it is. People are confusing normal with natural. Just because one way of operating is normal for you, that doesn't mean that's who you are naturally. It just means it's a really well-traveled path that you've been on. And it's going to take a bit of effort. And by the way, the structure that people are, we're all interesting creatures, aren't we? So people are funny on that. Like they just want to go the fast path, like we talked about, and they just want to go out and have the blast off out of body experience and think that's their salvation. The journey of healing, that hero's journey that we are walking, and what unfolds as a result of pursuing that innermost essence, pursuing wisdom, pursuing betterment, what happens to you as a result of that pursuit, who you become as a result of walking that path, is what it's about. And having been on this path for a very long time myself, I can understand that feeling of just wanting to fix what feels wrong, and going to the end of the book, like you said, just go to the last page, see what the last chapter tells you to do, and just do that. It's like you're missing the ABCs in 1, 2, 3s before you get to, how to construct those base elements into something like language, for example, or a beautiful math equation.
No, 100%.
So it's important for us to do the work, to walk that path that's difficult. And I think that if people are having a hard time, which a lot of people do have a hard time on their own, at first anyway, they might, it's important to identify the right type of guide, the right type of practitioner, the right type of person for whatever stage you're in on that journey, and make sure that you feel this, you get the support that you need to go through the process that you need to go through of, again, undoing and rebuilding at different stages, and aligning with what's best for you on this path, I think, is everyone's destiny. But where people are is unique, and what people need is unique, and meeting people where they need is, I think, that is my that's my favorite. That's my like.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And, it was funny because one of my favorite quotes of all time, which I think perfectly summarizes what we've talked about, is there are many paths to reach the same destination. The only one that is quote unquote wrong is the one that tells you there's only one way to get there. And so what are we saying? This is one of infinite different paths, right? If you like it, great. If you don't, great, right? Be true to yourself. But what we're also saying is don't let anyone convince you there's only one way to get somewhere, because there just isn't.
Right.
And when you read Disappearance, one of the things I love so much, and all 4 of this guy's books are amazing. His 4th one is probably my favorite. It's The Lifetimes When Jesus and Buddha Knew Each Other. And it's just like, it's a powerful, powerful book, because he talks about how, if you look at Buddhism, for instance, right? Buddhism of today is like no intoxicants. They're very strict on that, right? Don't ever put anything that can alter your consciousness into your body. But what Gary or the Ascended Masters that talk to him share with him is that, they're like, Gary, people today don't get it, because these are non-dualistic, ways of living, right? What Jesus was teaching, what Buddha was teaching, what Lao Tzu was teaching, what Plato was teaching, these are non-dualistic individuals. So first of all, they never would have made a religion, because that would be in the dream that's not real, and that would get people farther into the dream, right? reading all this scripture, forgetting to have the direct experience of God, forgetting to walk in the forest and feel him all around you. No, I got to study the scripture, right? So like he would have never done that. And also, when you think about this dream not truly being reality, it's not useless. The point is to have the best dream possible. And you do that by waking up to who and what you truly are and helping your fellow brothers and sisters who are also you do the same thing. But he mentioned in that Jesus and Buddha would never have said you can't do something, because to say that would imply that somehow it's negative, and negative implies duality, and that then makes it real, right? So what they would have said is the middle way, right? So is cannabis good or bad? Should you do plant medicine or not? I don't know. How do you feel about it, right? That's what a non-dualist would say. They would never say do it or don't do it, because that implies duality. That implies there's a right and wrong. And that's where I really started to see through a lot of stuff in the world. When I started with that book, because I had always known that when people tried to push stuff on me, I was like, ugh, it's so icky, right? Like if I'm excited about it, then I ask you about it. Yeah, sure. Tell me about it. But these people are like, there's only one way. I'm like, that is such an ego thing. It is an insane ego trip,
really
Is.
It really is. It really is. I appreciate you talking about that on the middle way. That is my life's work.
Same.
Personally speaking, it's not to do, well, I actually do facilitate people through liberating themselves by finding that middle way. And the middle way to me on an energetic level, if you think about the first principles and natural laws, you recognize that everything that they teach in those, like in the Kabbalion, on breaking down these principles, you realize that it's the practical way to be walking that middle path, so that you don't polarize yourself in duality. Because as soon as you polarize yourself to one end, then you create opposition. And when you create opposition, you have resistance. You create friction, and you end up creating drama from that place of consciousness. And then what happens is people end up feeling the result or the outcome of that friction. And then they end up continuing to dig themselves even deeper, because they anchor into their patterns of behaviors that end up polarizing them even more. And then they wonder, why do they continuously attract the same people and problems in their life? So the middle way to me is the best way to walk this life. However, I also recognize it's an interesting thing this year for me. This year, my theme is unity consciousness. I pick themes every year.
Yes.
So unity consciousness is this year. And also understanding and studying the law of one, and recognizing these, polarized states and their purposes. I've actually come to appreciate those who are born in a polarized, negatively polarized frequency, because they force us to wake up. And that was my revelation with my own sibling. I had a very difficult living and working relationship with my sister. We still can't function together, but she literally was that polarized person for me. And when I was healing from complex trauma, I realized she was my greatest spiritual teacher. And then I realized, wow, what a gift she gave me. She came into this world so that I could wake up, so that I could be polarized by her negativity and literally choose that middle way, choose unity, choose non-duality to the degree that I can.
Yeah. Because we're not meant to be perfect, right? Like if we were, we would have never left wherever there is, right? We're here to essentially we forget we're God, and so it's supposed to be a little messy. It's supposed to be color outside the lines, but that's the beauty of it. And I love what you said, because if you go back to tier 2, what you just said is really like my amalgamation of what I believe tier 2 to be, right? The ability to look at a situation happening in life, whether you perceive it positive or negative, right? Dualistically, and be able to find an architect that story rather, in a way that serves you for your highest good. So like that right there is what I believe like the term mindset kind of speaks to, right? The ability to go, well, like for me, like my dad died when I was 23 of cancer. Pretty shitty. But also it woke me up to a lot of stuff. It woke me up to my mortality. It woke me up to the fact that like, hey, I'm here. I got to do something, right? I get to do something with my life. And it also gave me a beautiful story that helps me connect with millions of people across the world. So, again, like I've witnessed family members and friends that don't have that ability to create a powerful story or a positive one over something otherwise challenging. And yeah, it can eat you alive, and again, like, I'm very grateful to psychedelics and things like that, because they kind of gave me my first glimpse at that. Because when you're going through a bad trip and you end up thinking it's a bad trip, you got to convince yourself real quick and find a story that's going to be this helping you, or you're going to have a psychic break. So
it's the fastest. Yes, exactly. It's the fastest path to a breakthrough or a breakdown.
Exactly.
Either one. Yeah. And I appreciate you even like acknowledging your experience with your father's passing. Question: would you even be doing what you're doing today had you not had that experience with your father? Do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's impossible to say, but like I've talked to my dad a lot of times when I've gone to plant medicine states and whatnot. And that was like, actually one of my first real spiritual experiences with psilocybin was when my dad got sick. I didn't realize I was healing, but what ended up happening, because I didn't have the words for it at that age, but what I was doing was every weekend, my friends from childhood would come over, because my parents' house was always the hangout house, and my dad was their second dad. And we'd all just do mushrooms every weekend. We didn't realize we were all processing grief together, And so like, I remember there was one night where taking mushrooms back then was so funny. Sometimes you take them and your body feels weird. Sometimes you're just gone. Like, we didn't understand strains back then. Back then, the kind of thing was, they're all the same. And I was like, I don't think that's true. But like, there must have been a time we got penis envy or something. And we just went to this. I was just completely encompassed into this golden light. And it felt like the womb. And I was there and I could talk to my grandmother, my Nana, any past relative, pets. I was just there with them. And from that experience, after that, I feel like it lessened the blow of my dad dying, because I knew like, wow, I know exactly where he's going. It's fucking awesome. And I know I can get there. Maybe, I don't know if like I can get to this place every time, but I know there's a way that I can get there. Maybe I have to go learn, whatever. But, I realized in that moment I had the experience, which again is so much better for me than just having faith in it. Like, faith is a catch-all, it's like a tricky thing, right? Because we get it. It's so important. But why are they asking you to have blind faith if there's a lot of parts of you that don't believe that? Like, once I had that experience, I never had to convince myself that my dad was going to die and that was going to be the end of it. Like, I never had to convince myself away from that again. Once I had that experience, it was hard. I wish he could still be here with me, but it's not the end of his story, And that is really, I think, the reason I can talk about it so freely, So it's very interesting. I can't go back and try it the other way, but that's my best guess, So yeah, it's cool. Thank you for receiving.
Oh, we could talk about this stuff.
I know. Shawna, it's been amazing. I can't believe we already gone through an hour. I'm going to have to get you back on. Hopefully we can do one in person when I come down to North Carolina, or we meet up in person somewhere in the world. But I want to make sure I give you ample opportunity to tell people where they can find you, where they can find out about working with you, and all the amazing things you have coming down the pipeline.
Thank you for asking. So I think that right now the best place is just my name, shawnapelton.com. Even though I'm currently building a new site, that will take you there eventually anyway. So that's the best route to learn about those, the different ways in which I facilitate people on their quest for self-actualization.
Beautiful.
Through non-ordinary states of consciousness, with or without medicine. Because that's important for people to be able to have choice and recognize that there's different stages and different levels of medicine. Sometimes it's no medicine.
Yeah, different strokes, different folks, right? There's no right or wrong answer, right? That's what we're saying. It's like, guys, just tune into your heart. And if you're like, I don't want to do medicine, don't do it. It's not right for you. Maybe at some point it will be. But until that happens, don't let anyone convince you medicine's the path. Or on the other side, if you really feel deep down in your core, like, no, these medicines are helping me, do not let anyone tell you they're not. Because they don't know. They're not you, and there is no objective reality. Everything here is subjective. So, Shawna, I like to ask everyone a last question. You ready?
I am.
All right. Let's say someone listens to this episode and they are beyond excited to explore psychedelic medicines in their own life. What is the one piece of advice you would offer them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether or not these medicines are right for them right now in their life?
I would say, first and foremost, context matters. Whatever's going on in the nervous system. Are you destabilized already? Because if you are, it's going to be difficult to do a journey. So start with body. Listen to your body, and your body's going to be the one to dictate the direction you go.
100%. It's kind of like the body is driver's ed, driver's school. You got to do that before you can drive the car, and you got to drive it around a block before you can put it on the highway, So I love that. Shawna, this has been a blast. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you go check out Shawna's website. We're going to put everything in the show notes, but make sure you follow her. She's amazing, one of my dear friends, and I can't wait to have her back on. If you loved the episode, go give us a 5-star review if you haven't already. I'm looking at you. And until next time, may the source be with you to infinity and beyond. Peace for now.